You ready the mustering horn and take the deepest breath you can before giving it your all. The call warps and twists in the wind. It echoes off the rocky cliffs behind you and soars over the waves. And then you feel an answering roar from the depths below that thrums in your bones. You see a great shape slicing through the dark depths. You drop the diving bell in and hope the magic works. You step up to the great beast. You can't think of what else to call it. It's hard to even wrap your head around the idea of the thing. Using the diving bell as a kind of psychic anchor, you project your will into the great beast. For a moment, the image of dark waves and tremendous hunger threatens to drown you. But you call upon your training, your sense of school, and the power of light, and soon enough, it's purring. Though its purr could probably shatter continents.
With sloping scales and dripping maw, as who pursued with yell and blow still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The beast drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward aye we fled. The Starfall sea awaits. Shall we board our formidable craft and get underway? Climb upon the great beast and enter the diving bell. You'll need to focus on the dying star stone to guide us safely to our destination. Listen close. Despite the great beast's strength, anything could go wrong and leave us drowning at the bottom of the waves. Or swimming in the middle of the Starfall Sea, waiting for something to snap us up. Now, place the dying star stone on the pedestal to activate it.
You place the dying star stone in its spot on the navigation pedestal. It sparkles with power.
If we stay on the surface, not only will the Shadow Queen's forces be able to find us, but we'll be shredded by the maelstrom. Get ready to dive. Use the altimeter to signal the great beast to submerge.
You touch the altimeter and imagine yourself going down, down, down into the deep.
Quickly now, pay attention. I've placed the Nautic stones to help us navigate. Go to the Mundana crystal and adjust it. Slightly!
You adjust the Mundana crystal as best you can, under the captain's rapid-fire commands.
Yes, good. I think that was just enough. Wait! The great beast groans and flinches. Something is distressing him. When harried or vexed, the great beast's desire is to dive deep. If we let him, our diving bell will be ripped apart by the ocean gyre. We cannot sit on the surface, nor swim too deep, for certain death lies on either end. We need a steady hand on the helm. When the great beast tries to plunge below, we must instead force him to rise and deal with whatever we find. Use the altimeter to cause the great beast to rise, and venture out onto his back and deal with the disturbance.
You touch the altimeter and force the great beast to rise. You hear a thundering snarl of protest, but he obeys.
Buzz! It's true! The Spellbinder has harnessed a great beast of the Starfall Sea! White Razors, attack!
quite razor's eye. They must have followed us from Crescent Beach. We'll be well into the storm soon, and they won't be able to follow. Of course, we'll have bigger problems then. Use the altimeter to convince the Great Beast to submerge again. We don't want to batter the diving bell more than we have to.
You use the altimeter, guiding the Great Beast to swim below the surface again.
I need you to check the Oceana Crystal. It keeps the diving bell safe. And also examine the Atala Stone. It measures the Great Beast's fear and passions.
You inspect the Oceana Crystal and turn it just slightly to improve its resonance. The Atala Stone purrs in time to the rumblings of the Great Beast. But then suddenly it flickers and sparks.
Blast and tarnation! Something in the water is bothering the beast. Nip it at his fins. Rise up! Use the altimeter and break the surface. Let's draw these bedeviling vermin up with us, where we can deal with them proper.
You guide the Great Beast into a swift rise with the altimeter. It's a thrill to have such power under your command. Once again, the path outside is open. Time to chase off the vermin.
Whirligigs, spiteful things. They prey on smaller fish, but they'll try to take a nip out of anything that passes their way. Me guess is the Shadow Queen riled them up. Good work driving them off. That's the edge of the maelstrom we're entering. Time to send the Great Beast below again, so we don't get torn asunder.
Through the altimeter, you can sense how violent the storm is getting. It takes much more effort to guide the Great Beast this time.
Keep an eye on the Mondana and Oceana crystals, and keep them in harmony. And don't take your eyes off the Rasatala Stone, nor the Mahatala Stone, else the Great Beast may decide to devour us himself.
You do your best to keep the crystals and stones in harmony. It takes a great deal of concentration and precise measurements. All of a sudden, all of the crystals and stones start a cacophonous ringing.
Egads, I was afraid of this! The deep spawn that dwell beneath the maelstrom are rising against us! Deep spawn are vile terrors. Whether the Shadow Queen sent them, or they are just hungry, doesn't matter much. They are hideous and cruel, and could tear chunks out of the great beast himself if you don't stop them. Raise us up and get ready to fight amongst the storm. Head out and drive off the deep spawn, or we'll never make it!
The altimeter shudders under your touch and grows painfully hot. The sound of the waves becomes a roar that makes your ears ring. As the way opens, you can hear a skittering of claws on scales and a dissonant call and response of the deep spawn.
Verwingrui Nobel Nath, Morgenth, Shog, Wakra, Nadel, Versagen! That is not dead, which can eternal lie.
When the deep spawn stirred, I thought for sure you were done for. I guess something is looking out for you, wizard. I hope the way is clear. We've seen near every kind of hateful thing that swims in the Starfall Sea. It was once a serene, becalmed ocean, until the Shadow Queen stirred it up and set it to roiling. Now let's finish this journey. Dive us down!
You ease the altimeter down again, and the great beast gracefully follows your lead. Well, as gracefully as he can for his size.
It's time for you to use the Dying Starstone to guide us through the worst part of the Maelstrom. We'll be fine, if you don't mess it up. In which case, we'll all be jettisoned soon enough.
You focus your will to a razor-sharp point, and use that to read the mystical aura of the Dying Starstone. It pulls and spins, threatening to drag you into the Maelstrom. But you stay calm, and soon find yourself where you need to be.
And now there came both mist and shade, and it grew wondrous cold. And shadows dark came floating by, as black as charcoal. The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into that silent sea. Welcome to this star-blasted and shadow-cursed isle. Wizard, we may be the only living things to step upon this rubble in ages. I'm sure there are plenty of ghosts nearby. You seem to have a way with their kind. Look for a friendly shade.